don't know where you've got that from.
Well, no, I wasn't meaning in terms of the ability to go back. Some of the cabinet members were saying that many of them don't want to come back. So all I want is all I want. This is about, this is an objective discussion here we should be having, not a subjective one, and that's why we need information in the report, not hearsay about whether schools do or don't want to return. It should be in the report. Okay, I'll leave that one there anyway. But if you were just to have one pool, where would you locate it to serve the greatest number of people?
All we're looking at now is a short-term sticking plaster for the borough. So people have got a leisure centre within 20 minutes. We aren't looking at the long-term view because we don't know what the long-term view is going to be.
So you've had a choice of one pool to serve the most people.
Made until we know exactly where we are. Like Councillor Vincent said, we are very dependent on hopefully getting some government grant funding, because we've spent so much money on this pandemic, there's nothing left in the pot.
Okay, I appreciate all those things. I was just wondering which one would be the most logical pool to open to serve the most people.
Well, which do you think? I don't know. Which do you think? I mean, let's face it. We can't blink in. Well, we don't know, do we? We don't know until I've just said we've got to go through all these questions. We've got to go through all these questions before not your questions what we're going to come up as we're going to open the pools and the swimming and the leisure centres, etc. But we can't do anything until we know how much funding we're going to get.
I mean, to be honest, it doesn't really matter what you think or I think about this, about which pool we'd open. All we need to do is look at the figures, and we haven't got the figures, or we didn't have the figures. I believe those figures are now in place. So again, I would like the committee to look at that, and if not, then I'd like the cabinet to look at. But my understanding of this issue is that Fleetwood Pool, for instance, last year had sort of roughly 134,000 people visiting it, as opposed to which is way more than Garstang and Poulton combined. So on those sort of figures, you would choose Fleetwood because it serves the most people. Anyway, let's move on.
Councillor Fail.
Yeah.
Councillor Fail, I just want to make the point that a lot of these questions seem to be on ifs, buts and maybes, and perhaps and mights.
No, absolutely. Absolutely facts. They're about what the facts are, what the breakdown between gyms and pools, how many days as these centres being open, how many days they're being closed. Let's get a set of figures in there can be relied upon to make a judgment on. At this moment in time, we wouldn't make any decision on those statistics because they are so badly flawed. So let's move on to the national curriculum now. Do you believe Sorry?
Councillor Fail, that is the past. We have got to look forward.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Can we have the statistics in place? That's what I'm asking. Anyway, in terms of the national curriculum, do you believe Wyre has a responsibility to help schools ensure that they meet the national curriculum requirements so that every 10-year-old child leaves primary with the skills to keep themselves safe?
Can I answer that, please, Councillor Everson? Would you mind if I answer that? Yeah,
certainly, that's no problem.
I think what we should do is look at this historically. As I understand it, it was made a curriculum issue, swimming, by the Blair government in about 1997, and the Blair government, I think, expected county councils who are responsible for schools to make provision for swimming. And what actually happened was that in Lancashire, 3 years after that was brought in and made a curriculum issue, the Lancashire County Council, which was led by Labour, started to close all these swimming pools down. So it seems a bit odd that we're having this point raised when, in fact, it was never a district council's responsibility to look after schools or make sure that schools could carry out their curriculum responsibilities. It was always a county council issue. So I don't quite get where Councillor Fail's coming from on this. It was clearly the responsibility of LCC, and the Labour-run LCC at the time basically got rid of all the pools. And it's worth noting that the only former Lancashire County Council pool still open is the one in Garstang, which is run by Wyre, because we saved that pool, and we saved it to make sure that there was swimming provision right across Wyre, not just in Fleetwood, not just in Poulton, but in Preesall and in Garstang as well.
Okay,
So
let me rephrase it then.
Who accepts responsibility? It's not our responsibility, but we have done our damnedest to make sure that that provision was there. What were you all lot doing?
Okay, I mean, we need to be looking at now, as Councillor Ibbotson said, but so County may be the educational authority, but Wyre has control of its swimming pools now. So do you not think this council should be cooperating to ensure that the national curriculum requirement can be met?
I think we've already shown, have we not, Councillor Fail, that we accepted that we should try and promote swimming across this borough and have done for the last 20 years. And I think if you look at what we did rather than what we say, it's pretty obvious that we've tried to provide as much swimming as we possibly can, whereas the Labour-run County Council abandoned it at the first drop of a hat. So okay. I'm not going to be lectured by you on what we should or should not do to help schools find provision for swimming, because we have done a remarkable amount over the last 20 years to make sure that happens. You asked Councillor Bowen, would she just have one pool? She asked you and you didn't want to know, did you? You don't want to answer that question, because the answer is we want to make provision across this borough as long as it's viable, as long as it's affordable. We don't want to see one pool in Fleetwood and no pools anywhere else, because that'll be doing what Lancaster do and having a pool that loses a fortune because nobody can travel that far to get to it. So no, I don't want to do that. We are looking to provide as much pool provision as we possibly can. And that, if that's two pools, we may have to have that discussion at some point as to which two pools it should be. But we have a track record of doing this, and we have a track record that we're proud of, and we are not abandoning pools. We are having a trial because we think that this is the pool that will give the best result on a trial. And as I said before, what do you want to do? Take a pool that it gives us the worst result, and then we close everything and say, oh, well, never mind, we gave it a good shot.
I don't accept that it's the worst pool. As I said earlier, the figures at Fleetwood Pool probably about 120% and Poulton combined. But anyway, I think we all want the pools open, and we need to have those pools open because we need to serve the schools, and there's a lot of schools obviously willing to come back. Adherence to the national curriculum may not be Wyre's responsibility, but they have Wyre has a duty to facilitate, in my view, the provision of swimming pools within a reasonable distance. They must do everything they can to help schools return to swimming. Now, we're returning one swimming pool, which is 17 miles away from Fleetwood, 15 miles away from Thornton Cleveley's, and I don't think that's sufficient, and I don't think it's sufficient to accept, just push it onto Blackpool Council to deliver a service to our schools, our clubs, and our residents. And I think it's unfair, and I wonder what Blackpool Council has got to say about this. We simply don't know what they think about it, because as Councillor Bowen said, no analysis of this has been done, which is, in my opinion, a huge gap. So let's move on to a different subject.
I want to just take you up on that point. I want to take you up on one of the points you've made there, because you say that we shouldn't be considering Blackpool Pool as being an available pool. When Preesall Pool was produced in 2007, and I still have a copy of the document that was produced by LCC, your Labour-run LCC, guess where they said that people from Preesall could go and swim? Have a guess. Have a wild guess, Rob.
Well, I don't know. I'm not aware of that.
I'll give you a clue. It was Moor Park. They could go to Garstang or Moor Park or Fleetwood.
Well,
and how far would they have to travel?
Irrespective of what they did at that time, irrespective of what anybody's doing now, what I would suggest.
I get the point you want to make your argument.
Blackpool Council should be we'll go to Blackpool Council, we do some analysis whether they can cover this off or not and get an answer back, and then make a decision, not just guess that Moore Park can be used. Moore Park wasn't even mentioned in the cabinet report, so that
would you like to give us a guess as to how long it might take to get all this data and information that you're talking about? Because quite frankly,
I don't know, but let's not make any decisions. Let's not make
you're asking for data, which in my view is not particularly relevant. If we then go back to a cabinet and say, okay, they want you to get more data, and we say to the officers just before Christmas, here's all this piles of data that Rob, as he always does, wants you to get. And then they say, well, we could probably let you have that by mid-February. Yeah. And then we'll do all the polls until mid-February. That'll be a result for you.
No, I just want some factual input into a cabinet report. What I don't expect is to just make some glib remarks saying that everybody's in reasonable distance of a pool and then not say where they think that pool is. According to that cabinet report, the inference is that it's Garstang Pool, not Moore Park, but then maybe that was just an omission. Anyway, let's move on. In terms of travel distance, I think we've seen to be
moving on. I think we've sort of pursued that quite long enough.
A lot of questions here. You said that we've got plenty of time, and I've got several questions still to ask and answer. So I think it's fair enough that we go through these. Otherwise, how are we meant to get to the bottom of this?
Councillor Fail, I want you to be as quick and precise as possible.
I'm trying.
I don't want to stifle debate. I appreciate we can't spend all year doing it.
Okay, thanks, Chair. You seem to have moved away from the stance at the cabinet meeting by bringing Moore Park into the equation. But at the cabinet meeting, you said, this is to Councillor Bowen, these two facilities are convenient for the west urban part of the borough and the rural east. So at what point does the journey become unreasonable, would you say, in terms of miles or minutes?
When it's more than 20 minutes, according to Sport England, and that's their figures, not mine.
Okay, so 20 minutes. So given there's a 17-mile drive from Fleetwood and a 15-mile from Thornton Cleveland, it's probably 30 to 45 minutes. That's out of range, would you say, the Garstang one? And is that why you're saying now saying Moore Park is the one that should...
I'm not now saying it. I've always said it. Stop trying to twist my words and stop trying. When you don't like the answer, you just try and track whatever I've said. Well, you know, if you're so keen on reading the cabinet report, then read it and make sure that you get it all in your head what's actually written down.
I did. I got it fully in my mind, and I quoted the response for the figures for the usage figures, and you told me that my figures were wrong. They were your figures. But anyway, let's move on. Climate change. Your 25th of November report to Cabinet said there were no significant climate change implications. This plan will result in a significant increase in travelling, won't it? Given we're talking about hundreds of thousands of pool visits, should this not have been thoroughly considered and documented?
I think you're grasping at straws there, quite frankly.
And I agree.
So are we not concerned about that in climate change, anybody?
I don't think it is relevant to debate.
Well, it's on the report. Every single report that is produced, executive report, has to consider whether there is a significant impact on climate change now, and it was crossed, that one, to say there is no significant implications arising from this report. I would say, if we're saying there's an increase in travelling distance, which there inevitably will, whether you go to Garstang, Moore Park or wherever, there is a significant impact on climate change, and that report should have stated that. Okay, we'll move on. In terms of the 21-22 costs, they're seemingly based on the worst case scenario, where all centres achieve only 40% of their target membership income. How reliable are those figures given the rapidly evolving situation with regard to the pandemic, and also, as has been pointed out, the lack of understanding as to the pool usage and gym usage at Fleetwood and Poulton?
Yeah, I can answer that because I've asked the question and I actually alluded to it earlier. there were projections, and obviously next year is a projection just in the same way that there's a projection for the next 3 months as well.